What would a character with 20 wisdom look like? Today we're going to break down the stat, talk about what situations might call for a wisdom roll, and discuss a few characters who best represent those aspects of wisdom. But before we can determine which character is the wisest of them all, we have to answer the first and most basic question. What is wisdom? Wisdom is one of the 6 main ability scores in Dungeons & Dragons and Baldur's Gate 3. The 5th edition player's handbook has this to say: wisdom reflects how attuned you are to the world around you and represents perceptiveness and intuition. One of the main difficulties people run into when it comes to talking about wisdom is how easy it is to get it confused with intelligence, because in our day-to-day lives we often use the 2 words, at least as English speakers, interchangeably. But in these games, they are 2 very, very different things. Strength is being able to crush a tomato. Dexterity is being able to dodge a tomato. Constitution is being able to eat a bad tomato. Intelligence is knowing a tomato is a fruit. Wisdom is knowing not to put a tomato in a fruit salad. And charisma is being able to sell a tomato-based fruit salad. So we can see a bit of a difference just from that little meme description, but let's dive into what the actual difference is between the 2 stats. Intelligence is having facts and information, being able to accurately identify things based on prior knowledge or deductive reasoning. Book smarts is how this is often described. Wisdom, on the other hand, is more of a gut feeling or a general sense of how to handle situations. This is your intuition and empathy, your street smarts, if you will. The high wisdom character is also going to be extremely perceptive. Nothing's going to be able to sneak up on them. You're not going to be able to trick them with a lot of things. They might not know, once again, exactly what's going on, but they'll know that's bad. I don't need to be interacting with that. Or this feels good. This feels like the way we should go. Let's go over here and check this out. Let's take a look now at the different skills that you'll find under the wisdom banner. Animal handling is described using scenarios like calming a spooked mount or domesticated animal, or even being able to intuit their thoughts and feelings. A character with high animal handling bonuses is right at home amongst the beasts of the world and can potentially form stronger bonds with them than someone with less points in this skill. An example of this can be seen in the Riddick movie, where Dominic Toretto makes this dog part of his family. As a nice extra little tidbit of trivia for you, did you know that Riddick's full name is Richard B. Riddick? Well, now you do. Do with that what you will. Insight is your ability to determine a creature's true intentions, predict their next move, or accurately tell if they are lying. A character with high bonuses in insight would be able to read other creatures like a book. They can sense your nervousness and see that you have a guilty conscience. You aren't slipping any subtle hints past this person. A great example of this is the elevator scene where Captain America realizes everyone else in the elevator is there to capture him. He notices strange behavior and body language, with people sweating profusely, stammering, shuffling around in the elevator. Basically, he can tell that these people are lying through their body language, and he knows something is wrong. And because of that, he's able to prepare himself for the attack before it happens. Medicine is defined as your ability to stabilize a dying companion or diagnose an illness. So basically, any character who is a healer or doctor will have a pretty high bonus in this one. And because not many people are aware that she has these powers, I want to spotlight Raven from DC Comics for this one. Raven actually has empathic healing abilities. This is actually how she was designed as a character, was to be an empathic healer, and then she kind of went more the shadow magic warlock kind of route. Because of these empathic healing abilities, she can feel other people's pain. She can use this to diagnose and cure almost any wound or illness. However, she has to take the person's pain upon herself in order to cure them of it, which I think is pretty cool. It adds a bit of a unique spin on the healer trope. Perception is defined as your ability to spot, hear, or otherwise detect the presence of something. It also measures your awareness of your surroundings and the keenness of your senses. Your head is on a swivel at all times, checking for hostiles and environmental hazards without even thinking about it. Any character with very heightened senses like Wolverine, Daredevil, or Spider-Man with his spider sense are going to have huge bonuses to this perception skill. All of the examples that I've just given you actually combine perception with insight in their daily lives, because all three of them have senses that are so heightened that they can actually use them to figure out whether or not someone's lying to them. Daredevil, on the other hand, has hearing that is so enhanced that he can hear the heartbeats of every person in the building that he's in, and he can detect minute changes in your heart rate and breathing when you try to lie to him. And then, obviously, Spider-Man's spider sense basically gives him like 360 vision of what's going on around him, causes him to accidentally react to things in time without even thinking about it. It's ridiculous. Spider sense is one of the most busted buffs you could possibly give somebody. And lastly, we have survival. This is your character's ability to follow a creature's tracks, hunt wild game, guide your party safely through a harsh environment, predict the weather, or avoid hidden hazards. The name says it all. It's your ability to survive in the wilderness. Geralt of Rivia is the example I'm going to use here. And you can pretty much just take any 5-second clip from the Witcher 3 video game to see what I'm talking about. Geralt is actually a very good example of every single wisdom skill, but his survival and perception bonuses are undoubtedly his best. He spends most of his days out in the wilderness tracking down and hunting dangerous beasts and monsters. His senses are greatly enhanced beyond peak human levels, and this gives him a solid bonus to his tracking abilities. If you need something found, Geralt is a safe bet to find it for you. So now that we know which situations might call for a wisdom roll and what types of characters might do well in those situations, let's attempt the hardest feat of them all. How do we scale wisdom from 1 to 20? Even though we just covered all of the related skills listed in the player's handbook, we still haven't discussed the fact that wisdom is the spellcasting stat for rangers, monks, druids, and clerics. So, there is almost an inherent relationship between nature, religion, and wisdom. So you can see how it starts to get kind of confusing when this character and this character both have 20 wisdom, but for drastically different reasons. Let's take a look at some examples from the monster manual and see what a high and low wisdom score looks like in D&D itself. It was actually extremely difficult to find creatures with less than 5 wisdom, and I actually ended up stumbling upon the spreadsheet that this guy had made. I'm going to leave a link to this in the video description. Shout out to this user right here, who has basically compiled like a ton of monsters from various different D&D books into a searchable spreadsheet. It's ridiculously awesome. And through using that, I was able to find a few creatures with less than 5 wisdom. But almost every single creature in D&D has 5 or higher. The lowest of the low wisdom scores belongs to the gas spore, which is more of an environmental hazard than it is a conscious enemy. You attack it, and it explodes and releases fungal spores all over the place. You breathe them in, you get infected, you know the drill. The other fungal enemies on this page also only have 3 wisdom each. These things are basically barely functioning creatures. They each serve a very robotic purpose, and they don't have any understanding of what's going on outside the bounds of that purpose. Magically animated inanimate objects are another good example of very low wisdom creatures. These things aren't formulating plans or connecting with nature, okay? They are magically forced into existence to serve a specific purpose, and they pretty much only do that. So now let's take a look at the other side of the coin, the high wisdom creatures. You're going to notice right away that there's a nature and religion connection to most of these. The Kuad and Kieran are 2 creatures of divine origin who both have 20 wisdom. Kuad are basically flying Mr. Meeseeks, being granted a task by their divine creator and doing everything they can to complete that specific task. It's even said that if they can't complete the task during their ridiculously long lifespans, that they will have children for the specific purpose of teaching that kid how to complete the task so that that child will complete it for them. Kieran, on the other hand, are basically the celestial version of the opposite of a black cat. Everyone who sees one of these elephant-sized dudes flying around is going to have good luck and many blessings bestowed upon them. Everyone loves it when these guys show up, and people often make trips to the mountaintop layers of the Kieran to seek their wisdom and guidance, or even to become monks and followers of the Kieran itself. Solars are outrageously powerful archangels with 25 wisdom. The monster manual states that only 24 Solars exist total, so that puts their power into perspective a bit. When one of these guys shows up, it is about to go down. They are each essentially the right hand of a deity. In order to find the absolute highest wisdom score in D&D, however, we're going to have to go to a different book from the monster manual entirely. The Guildmaster's Guide to Ravnica introduced a new creature to the world, the Guildmaster of the Selesnya Conclave, Trostani. If you want to picture what Trostani looks like, imagine 3 dryads in a trench coat that share one consciousness, but each also have their own personality, and each one represents one of the main 3 characteristics of the character: order, life, and harmony. Trostani is essentially a super druid with the ability to speak with all plants and animals, as well as exert a massive degree of control over them. She can summon animals or powerful fey creatures to aid her in combat, cause insects, plants, and thorns to grow rapidly at will, as well as controlling them with her magic. And she can even step into one tree and step out of another one, or animate those trees to fight for her as minions. With all the powers and abilities that Trostani has access to, as well as her connection with nature itself, it's clear to see why her wisdom score is so high. She's basically the living embodiment of nature itself, or the closest thing you're going to find to one. And on that very conveniently placed statement, let me quickly segue into the final section of the video, a section that I like to call, allow me to explain why I chose Swamp Thing to represent wisdom as a stat. When Alec Holland was a young boy on a school field trip, he was bitten by a radioactive swamp and became Swamp Thing. No, that's not his real origin story, but you know what, at this point I'm tired of origin stories and comic book stuff. Let's talk about what he can do after he's got some experience being the Swamp Thing, not the dumb nonsense he was doing on day 1. Oh no, I'm turning into a monster. The love of my life won't be able to stand looking at me. Woe is me. You've literally seen this story 514 times. Swamp Thing is the guardian of the green, which basically means that he is nature's protector and the physical embodiment of nature itself, much like Trostani. Delicious, by the way. He is able to sense every single plant and animal on the planet and can see through their eyes and use their other senses. This basically means his perception bonus is limitless, depending on how many living creatures are around. This is also one of the main reasons why he's so protective of nature. He feels the pain that the planet feels. You burn a flower and this guy is going to be furious about it. And I can tell you right now, you do not want Swamp Thing to be furious with you. He can communicate with dead trees that were used to make books and learn the history of the paper and the tree itself from the book, which is ridiculous and also awesome. Much like Trostani's ability to teleport from one tree to another, Swamp Thing can actually transfer his consciousness into any plant on the planet almost instantaneously, and can construct a brand new body in that location using the other surrounding plant matter. This is why in some comic book panels he looks very, very different, because he'll either be made up of purely thorny roses or purely cactus or something like that. So all of a sudden you have a cactus thing walking up to you. Swamp Thing can easily cause a massive surge in plant growth, causing entire jungles to spring up in the middle of busy cities, roots and vines tearing through buildings and concrete like they were tissue paper. Here's a scene where Swampy's girlfriend ate a piece of fruit with his universe juice in it, and she instantly started tripping balls after being granted the ability to see the world the way he does. She basically described it as a series of interconnected strands with jewels of light flying around inside of Swamp Thing's body, which he then proceeds to tell us are insects. That's what insects look like to him. And it's all connected, and isn't nature just beautiful? She should probably make out with this literal swamp monster made out of vines who we just discovered is full of living insects. That's real wisdom. Swamp Thing is almost a perfect representation of every single subclass of druid in Baldur's Gate 3, by the way, depending on how much creative license you're willing to allow. Here's a panel where a kid gets captured by some people who are going to eat him, and Swamp Thing shows up in the salad, turns into this plant dog, and proceeds to maul all the bad guys before setting their captive free. I'm personally willing to let Swamp Thing have plant versions of wild shape forms if you are. I think it's way more awesome that way, and you can even write in a set of resistances and vulnerabilities based on this change if you wanted to. Here's an example where he turns his body into a Loch Ness monster and asks this lady if he can borrow Tree Fitty. Here's one where he turns into a cluster of inflatable air sacs so he can float around on the wind, before bursting his own body and drifting to the ground as a series of seed pods, only to grow a new body from where they landed. He is fully capable of healing wounded or even dead creatures, as you can see here. He reses this bird in a matter of seconds and fully repairs its skeleton head back to normal non-skeleton form. Here's another example where he can sense a foreign substance in Batman's lungs, and he elongates his fingers into Batman's throat, gathering up all the harmful spores in his body and removing them, saving Batman's life. On the other side of that coin, however, here the Swamp Thing can be seen causing Constantine tremendous pain by forcing the flora in his intestines to start moving and growing. Swamp Thing also makes the terrifying point that he could easily do this to every person on Earth and that we would all explode from the inside out immediately, so that's pretty cool. Joke's on him though, I put weed killer in my cereal instead of milk, so we'll see who has the last laugh. Swamp Thing can generate spores in his body, which can cause various effects to anyone who inhales them, such as making them fall asleep or poisoning them, and his body is also not limited to a humanoid-sized form by any means either, and can just as easily turn into a big old treezilla and go stomping through town if that's the game you want to play. And just in case any of you thought you'd be cute and assume he's weak to fire since he's a plant guy, I've got some more cool news for you. The writers absolutely love this character, and you can see here in these panels that he eventually becomes the guardian of every elemental force in nature, not just the green. This means he is essentially the Avatar, with control over air, water, fire, all that jazz. This dude isn't weak to fire, he is a literal fire elemental and a water elemental. He's an everything elemental. He is also fully capable of growing fruits and vegetables from his own body or his surroundings, so he could feed an entire party on his own with ease. As far as his actual stats, I would take Trostani's stat block and give it a pretty hefty strength, dexterity, and constitution buff. Because from what I've read about both characters, I think Swamp Thing would solo Trostani without much issue. His strength is variable, depending entirely on the health of the green, so when the planet is healthy, he is almost infinitely strong. We're going to set this at 30 also. His speed is very respectable, but more importantly, he can shapeshift his body out of harm's way if an attack is going to harm him, and he wants to avoid it. I'm going to give him 22 dexterity. His constitution is linked to the health of the planet like his strength is, but it's also important to note that Swamp Thing can regenerate his entire body from a single piece of a living plant life anywhere in the universe. So as long as a single blade of grass exists, Swamp Thing is effectively immortal. Holland was a highly intelligent scientist before he became the Swamp Thing, and he retains that intelligence now. And I'm gonna set his intelligence at 16 or 17. And I think Trostani's 25 in charisma is probably fine where it's at as well. Swampy's pretty damn intimidating. He is a Justice League level threat and has single-handedly saved the world on multiple occasions. So I personally think Swamp Thing represents wisdom pretty well, but I also want to hear what you guys think. Let us know down in the comments who you think should have been the face of this video, or if you agree with my choice of Swamp Thing. Thank you all for watching the video, and a very special thanks to my channel members. You guys are incredible, and I can't thank you enough for the support. If you're interested in becoming a channel member or supporting my work, there are links in the description where you can do that. There is also a link to my Discord server where you can come and nerd out with a bunch of us about video games and comic books. The more the merrier, and I hope to see you there. As always, travelers, I am glad you got to see me. Do your best to stay alive out there. Until next time, see ya.